Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Bio, our series that interviews a different lawyer each month to talk about turning points in their career. My name is Julie Owsik Ackerman, and I am delighted to welcome my dear friend, Nyssa Taylor today. Hi, Nyssa.
Hi, I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into some of the exciting things you've been up to over the past some years.
A while. It's been a while.
So yeah, Nyssa currently is the managing staff attorney at the New Jersey Innocence Project at Rutgers University. She graduated from Temple Law with me. We were in our first study group together as little baby 1Ls. And
the best study group.
Yeah, study group ever. Shout out to Annie and Park. And before her current position, Nyssa was a public defender. She Title IX manager, counsel for the ACLU, all kinds of great work you've been up to. So I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we dive into the turning points, just tell us a little bit about the Innocence Project and the work you guys do.
Well, it is super exciting. It is the New Jersey Innocence Project at Rutgers University is its official title. So there is the large National Innocence Project organization, and then most states have a statewide Innocence Project. Until we started in 2022, New Jersey did not have a statewide Innocence Project. So it's one of the few states that needed one, which is why it was started. And so we represent people who are currently incarcerated, who are innocent of the crime for which they were incarcerated. So we are very busy in getting lots of requests for assistance.
I bet you are. Yeah. Do the requests? How can I ask this? Is it only for people who are in the New Jersey court system?
Yeah. Well, no, we will consider federal applications as long as the crime occurred in New Jersey.
Gotcha.
So you either have to be in a New Jersey state prison or a federal prison for a New Jersey crime.
Okay. All right. So that's the sort of qualifying thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. The Innocence Project represented somebody who was in the courtroom with Judge Ann Hall when I worked for her. And it was they do just really great work. I really have a lot of respect. Yeah.
I've been really grateful for the Pennsylvania Innocence Project, which has been around, been around since about 2013, and have exonerated, I think, it's more than 10 people at this time, but they really do. It's really great work. And I'm really grateful for a lot of the other statewide projects because they've really been so generous in sharing their knowledge and information and helping us get off the ground.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Okay, so let's roll the clock back a little bit. We're going to talk about some turning points. You had said one of your turning points was moving from major trials into appeals. But before we get there, just tell us a little bit about why you wanted to go work at the public defender's office.
So I didn't go into law school thinking I wanted to do a public defender. I thought I wanted to do public interest work. I knew I wanted to do public interest work, but I wasn't entirely sure what kind. And after my first year of law school, I did a summer at Community Legal Services, which was amazing, and worked in the elder law unit, and thought, oh, wow, this could be really awesome. But then I had trial ad and a clinical program with the defender. So my third year of law school, I took a clinical with Beth McHugh. That was her maiden name, who is an amazing, amazing defender, and realized that this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the courtroom. I wanted to be representing clients in this way. I wanted to do criminal defense. And after that, that's sort of where I set my focus.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like those first few years as a new public defender?
I think I probably worked harder than for the first 3 years, I did not have a weekend. I probably worked between 80 and 100 hours a week.
Mhm.
It was rough. But at the same time, it was fascinating work. It was really important work. I really loved working with clients and doing the work. No one, you work really hard, but it's not like you have a boss who's telling you you have to get a memo done last minute before the next day. It was like if I didn't do the work, my clients weren't going to be well represented. So I really felt obligated to do the best that I could under circumstances that were quite difficult.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And so, just tell us a little bit about, like, you start
Yeah,
out doing this certain thing and then kinda move up through the
exactly. Exactly. So you start as the defender and you do prelims for 6 months or preliminary hearings, which are every in Philadelphia, everyone has a right to a preliminary hearing, which is a sort of first hearing to determine whether there is probable cause for the criminal charges that are brought. So at these hearings, back then, we got to go out to all the police districts where they would have these hearings and police in these like weird courtrooms in the back of police districts, basically, with all the complaining witnesses, the victims, and the defendants were all in the same room. And so we would run these mini trials to see whether there was enough to hold the case over for felony court. And they were just wild. I mean, if you had a lineup, you had to like try to hide your client before the complaining witness got in the room and run around. Like people were yelling at each other. So that was like the first 6 months. And then they moved you into
trial by fire.
right. Except the good thing is if you messed up a preliminary hearing, it wouldn't have the same amount of impact as if you mess up a felony trial. So it was a nice way to really learn cross-examination and learn the different elements of crimes without actually watching people go to jail. Then you move into municipal court where you're representing people for misdemeanors. And so this was actually back, I'm going to date myself, but this was Lynn Abraham years when they were going after everything. So it was marijuana, prostitution charges, drug charges. But as a result, we got to try a lot of cases because the DA's office at that time wasn't agreeing to anything. So, but it was a lower step up. You did 3 to 6 months of incarceration or 1 to 2 years of incarceration. You weren't facing serious felonies. Then you did 6 months in juvenile. So you sort of did all these different rotations before they moved you to felony judge trials. And then after you did all these rotations, you could try to get a room in a major trials room where you were trying serious felony cases, everything except for homicide. And once you were in a major trials room, you sort of got to stay there for as long as you liked.
And so were you in front of the same judge? Is that what you mean by being in a room? Oh,
Yes.
interesting.
Yes. I actually was in front of 2 judges. I actually had the great luck of being in front of 2 very kind senior judges who were wonderful to be in front of because they were good sentencers, they were fair, and they didn't penalize people for going to trial, which was very, very unusual. So I knew that I could get the same sentence. Maybe I knew that I could get a guideline sentence, so a reasonable sentence within the sentencing guidelines if I went to trial. And so it really it was really beneficial for my clients because they were able to try cases that needed to be tried. And I didn't have to worry about them getting a trial penalty or a really stiff sentence as a result of going to trial.
Yeah. Yeah. That is awful that happens. Good that it was not happening in that.
That's rare. That does not happen. I had this extraordinarily luck, and that is not the case for, I would say, the vast majority of judges. Do not sentence in that way.
Yeah, hence why we need really good public defenders. Right.
Yeah, and more money for public defenders.
Well, because that's the other thing. Like, what percentage of cases would you say the public defender was representing? Do you have any idea? Like, I would think vast majority.
Between 80, I think it was at that time it was 86 or 87. But we were representing the vast majority of people charged with criminal offenses in Philadelphia.
Yeah. So yeah, such important work.
And I will just say, not to go into Pennsylvania is the only state that doesn't provide statewide funding for indigent defense.
The only state?
The only. And like you compare it to New Jersey, where state public defenders and state attorney generals are on the same pay scale. They're both state funded. They have the same, it is a vastly different system for basically every other state other than Pennsylvania. And so in Pennsylvania, what that means is in Philly, where you have a really strong defender association, really robust city council that understands the need to fund the defender, you have a much better representation system than you do in, for example, Cumberland County, where you have one public defender and the Cumberland County Council doesn't actually believe in the need for indigent defense.
Well, and again, just this like piecemeal county by county system is, yeah, I can imagine very problematic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I did not realize we were the only state. That's appalling.
Yeah.
That's appalling.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty bad.
Oh, Pennsylvania. Okay. So, all right. So then you said that you had moved from one of your first turning point was moving from major trials into appeals. So tell us, when that happened, why you wanted to make that move.
So, I was very glad to get into major trials. One of the best parts about being in major trials versus the other. Actually, let me step back for a second. The Philadelphia Defender Association is unusual in that they do not represent people horizontally. So they do not represent people from the beginning until the end of the case. And what that meant is that people were seeing a new defender every time they had a new court case. And it was very, very hard to develop meaningful relationships with people, with your clients, or trust with your clients when you were the fifth or sixth or seventh attorney that they saw. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that was so nice about getting into major trials was that I could see my clients again. So if a case didn't move forward, then I knew that I would have them again in 2 months. And so I was able to develop relationships and rapport and negotiations, and it worked so much better for my clients. And honestly, for me too, it was much more enjoyable to actually know my clients and have fewer of them. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, the volume did get overwhelming. And the other thing that honestly I really struggled with was the behavior of some of the DAs and a couple of the other judges, not my judges, but some of the other judges that I did wind up appearing in front of. And I think it was like I had 1 2-month period where I tried 8 juries. And at the end of that, I was like, I can't. And I am not an extrovert. I love trials. I have fun at them. But when I'm on trial, like I come home, I can't hold a conversation. I can't call my mom to check in and see how she's doing. I felt like I was like powering down at the end of the night. I had to like just stare at Netflix, or at that point it was like stare at a TV and like zone out because I couldn't have a conversation. Yeah. And I just realized it wasn't working. And it was actually when I started to lose my temper. Like I got really pissed at a DA and was like, okay, this isn't working anymore. I don't want to be the public defender that's like yelling. And this is not sustainable, but I really loved the work and didn't want to give it up. Yeah. So I was so happy when I was lucky enough to get a position in the appeals division, which meant that I was writing briefs most of the time, and which was so fun.
Great job for an introvert.
Exactly, but I still could do a trial here and there. So I always kept a serious. They would give me the yucky trials, so I would keep the yucky trials, and I also got to try cases with my colleagues, which was
that's cool.
So fun. I had this, I did 2 or 3 jury trials with a partner, and having a partner made me realize that's how we all should be trying cases. So that was wonderful. And yeah, just getting to write, not having to be in court every day, and a much more manageable and sane schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you have a partner, as like, what is there like a typical kind of breakdown, or there's a first chair and a second chair. So how does that work? Or it probably depends on the situation.
When I tried it, we didn't really do first chair, second chair. We just split up every cross and direct, opening and closing.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But what I found to be the most helpful is the way it really felt like having two brains. Instead of it just being me, it was someone else who could be listening really carefully when I was crossing, or
Mhm.
I was listening, and they could, just having another. I also had the benefit of just really, it was Jill Heilman and just amazingly brilliant lawyers to work with. And I felt like I learned more. I became a better lawyer as a result of it. They can also give you feedback. As a defender, I never had supervision. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Maybe like a supervisor came in once and was like, yeah, good job. So to really have like someone with you being like, oh, maybe you could ask this question, or that could have been a different, way to tackle it. And that just really, it was just it was a gift to be able to have another partner.
Yeah. Yeah. It's being a part of a team, even a team of two is huge. Yeah. All right. So you moved to appeals and you're pretty happy there, it seems like. And at some point, your next turning point, you decided to take the job, do policy work. So tell us about that transition.
Yeah. So again, I loved my work at the Defender, but I needed to make more money. I wasn't quite paying my bills, and it had been quite a while. So, but I wanted to continue doing public interest work, and so a friend recommended that I consider Title IX work, which I hadn't even thought of. And so I wound up leaving the Defender and taking a position at Rowan University as our Title IX manager, where I was investigating allegations of sexual assault, but also writing policy for the university, trying to do education around sexual assault, consent. And I think, surprisingly, it's actually a pretty natural fit for a defender.
Yeah.
As a defender, we're often talking about sexual matters and crimes in a really straightforward way without any shame or embarrassment. And so I think having that skill set and being used to talking to people about really difficult and traumatic experiences, I think made it a good transition. I also think as a defender, you have to have a skeptical perspective. And I think that sort of being able to see both sides does lend itself to online work. Ultimately, that it was not a great fit, but and so I wound up going back into criminal justice work, and it wasn't actually. I really loved the students and the work itself. I really enjoyed. I just it was, it's hard to get universities to really pay attention. And to really like track what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So then that led to the ACLU. Tell us about what you were doing with the ACLU and how long were you there? Like 5 years?
5 years. Yeah, it was a while. I feel like it flew by. Yeah, I was at the ACLU for 5 years. I started off as their policy counsel, but then moved into strategic litigation and policy. So did a lot of work in Harrisburg, trying to unsuccessfully get them to do the right thing. A lot of work with the Sentencing Commission, the Pennsylvania Sentencing Commission, also advocacy toward the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So despite the dysfunctionality of a lot of the state, we have a surprisingly good and forward-thinking Supreme Court. So we wound up focusing a lot of our energy and attention at getting the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania to right some of the really egregious wrongs that we were seeing. And I focused primarily on pretrial detention, because that was just Pennsylvania, in addition to not having funding, also has one of the highest rates of mass incarceration. It's the highest in the Northeast. And so focusing on the drivers of that and how we could sort of try to tackle bail, cash bail, probation and parole detainers that held people in custody for months and months and months awaiting trial. And so those two levers were really what I spent the bulk of my time focusing on fixing.
And were there any wins that you're proud of in that time?
Well, it hasn't been a win yet, but I will say the Supreme Court did come out with some new bail and detainer rules, which we were quite delighted. They haven't actually passed them yet, but the proposed rules are far better than the old rules. One thing I will say is what we realized is that the rules and the law themselves are it's quite good. There is actually a lot of protection contained within the Constitution, contained within the rules of criminal procedure that really forbid a lot of what we're seeing. It's just magisterial district judges who assign bail across the state wholeheartedly ignore them. It's like I literally, it's like you start reading the rules to them and they act like you're crazy.
Wow.
So it's really, the thing that was so tricky that I found really frustrating about the policy work is that someone said this to me once, and it was culture eats policy for breakfast. And that's really what it felt like. It was like you're just dealing with these microcultures in every county. And that's what drives the incarceration, not the laws, not the rules, not what the Supreme Court says. And so until we can figure out how to shift culture in a state where there's 67 counties, it's a much harder lift in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I remember when I was doing refugee work before I went to law school, I just felt so overwhelmed by like the number and the magnitude of problems that clients were having. And I felt like I couldn't solve any of them. And at least with like a legal case, I was like, okay, here's something where I can actually do some good. Not that I was doing good before, but it was just like, I hear that when you're talking about the system, like when you're dealing with these systems, it can just be like so discouraging.
It's one of the reasons why I wanted to return to client work was that like, I came across, there was an old box from 1980, right after the ACLU of Pennsylvania had incorporated. And it was like priority number 1, fixed cash bail. And I was like, 40 years later, and I was like, it feels really intractable. But at the same time, I have the utmost respect. Our legislative director, Elizabeth Randall at the ACLU of Pennsylvania, I called her the swamp queen because she's so realistic and thoughtful and really focused on minor wins. And I don't mean that because that's how you create change.
Yeah.
And she works across the aisle. She is open-hearted and also very foul-mouthed. Just a brilliant woman, and did so much good for the organization and for the state by really continuing to push in this environment that's just bonkers. Like I went to Harrisburg and I was like, oh hell no. And Liz was like, oh yeah, it's so great. This part, and I was like, oh my God.
Just laughing because I know you. Yeah, I can see how that could be a tough fit.
I was like, get me back to my clients where I can like focus on one thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do have so much respect for, there's many ways to, fight for a good cause. And, I think that there's room for all of us to do a piece, and finding which piece is a good fit for you, I think is part of a journey, right? Like, so thankful for the people who can just like see that big picture and just keep, pushing it forward,
right,
one step at a time. And then we need people to do client work, right? So jobs for everybody. So, all right. So, which leads us to the final turning point you mentioned, which is coming to this position now. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I have to, my dear friend who Aisha Baruni, sent me the listing, and she sent me the listing with the caveat that said, I know you think innocence is stupid, but I really, I really think you should look at this job.
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
As a committed defender, I really believe in defending guilty people and innocent, defending everyone. And honestly, the innocent ones at the defender were the cases that really gave me heartburn. I mean, those were the ones that were the worst, because if you lost, it was the just awful. But it's really been such a gift. I don't think innocence is stupid. I think it's
Just
really,
correct the record on that.
look, I think we should, I do have to say, I would love to see the New Jersey Innocence Project. And I know that my colleagues are with me on this, become the New Jersey Justice Project.
Oh,
There
yeah.
are a lot of people who may have committed the crime, but who did not deserve the sentence that they received.
Yeah.
And reading through all these letters is heartbreaking. I read through one where it was very clear he was engaged in a psychotic episode. No one was hurt. Nothing was taken. There was no weapon. It was a carjacking. It was a burglary, but
Yeah.
he got 30 to 60 years for that.
Oh,
And
God.
it's this is someone with a disease, right? This is someone with a substance use disorder who was having a psychotic break.
Yeah.
And instead of treating him, he's going to be serving the rest of his life in jail. Now, he's not innocent,
Right.
but I don't think he's any less deserving of my time.
Right.
So ultimately, I would love to see our project expand. But before we do that, we are limited right now in factually innocent, because there are quite a few. And that's heartbreaking too. I mean, seeing these letters, so many of them were really young. There's a lot of false confessions, a lot of folks with disabilities who were said things they shouldn't have said, but didn't commit any crime. And so really it feels like a real privilege to be able to do this work. And, on behalf of people.
And when did you start? And yeah.
So it was September. So not even it's pretty recent. Yeah. So, and the first thing I had to do was set up this, we set up our intake system. I was we have to get a client intake tracking system, a case management system, figure out how we're going to be collecting data, how are we going to be reviewing these cases. And so sort of trying to set up the building blocks to create the structure that we can start receiving letters. And we have, without any website or any advertising, we've already, I think it's 150 letters from applicants.
Word is out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which speaks to, the need, right?
Yep.
And I don't know if we said this or we just talked about this before we came on air, that you are actually starting the project, yeah.
So I will say it was conceived by this amazing group of women at the school. So Jill Friedman, who was the pro bono dean, who was amazing, the director of forensic sciences, who is a forensic archaeologist and a fingerprint expert specialist, criminal justice, social work, and then the Newark, Laura Cohen, who's the director of the criminal justice, youth, and race center. So this really interdisciplinary group of women were realized that there was a need. And Kimberly Moran really sort of drove this forward as a forensic science expert. She saw sort of how New Jersey was behind in all these different ways, how there wasn't an innocence project to sort of work on some of these forensic issues. And so really pushed the university forward. And Jill and Laura managed to get the grants that enabled the university to hire me. So I came in September, but it was a much, much longer, I want to say, birthing process than just me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So here you are, and you're, putting all these systems in place. And what have been some of your challenges and rewards so far?
So I think honestly, it's just realizing the volume and the level of, I feel like intake feels really important, and making a careful assessment of someone's case has been far more, I don't want to say, well, it has, in some ways it's been far more challenging than I sort of had initially expected. I've never done this kind of very serious intake process. But it's where we can make mistakes that hurt folks. And so understanding that, and at the same time, just understanding the volume. These are cases that have had, in many cases, post-conviction petitions, appeals, sometimes habeas, and just reading through these voluminous folders takes a long time. And honestly, I'm frankly surprised by the number of viable, I will say, so we have a different stage, and we have about 30 folks in our stage 1, which is like very initial screening. We have I think it's like 25 people in our stage 2 screening, which means they've met that initial criteria. And now we're in the process of reading all of their publicly available data. And we have 6 people in the stage 3 process, which means they've met all those initial criteria. And now we're trying to investigate, look at interview witnesses, potentially gather court records, and just, I knew that post-conviction petitions were an extraordinary amount of work. And I'm sort of just feeling, like, oh, we're going to need more people if we're going to be representing more than 1 or 2 clients, because it's a lot. And I didn't quite expect the volume to be so fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, I did a lot of PCRA work when I clerked for Judge Ann Hall. And the files, just figuring out the procedural history alone was like first this, then this petition, then this appeal, but then it was, I had files that were like 30 years old.
Yeah. 2 of the cases in our stage 3, one of them is from 1985.
Yeah.
And it's like, and there might be DNA. There was like, so having to, and then another one is like a really complicated gang shooting in Camden. And it's like, you start pulling threads, and it's like the investigation alone is going to take probably 6 to 8 months, if not more. And that's if I was able, I feel like I could take any one of these cases and spend my full time working on them. And so learning how to set up a new organization and manage both the responsibilities of being essentially the manager of that organization, but also having the responsibility toward the people we're agreeing to represent. So learning how to navigate that has been a little bit complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it would be for
right.
Yeah.
Like this week I have to write a Bureau of Justice grant, like a BJA grant. And like, that's going to take me a week. It's a really long grant, and I need to be careful with it. And I'm like, that means I'm grant writing, not investigating.
Yeah. So whoever's listening, Nyssa needs some staff to continue doing this amazing work.
Bureau of Justice, give us some money.
Yeah, seriously though. Do you have students working with you, or yeah?
We do. So we have Laura's clinic is, so I am technically operating under her clinic. So last semester she had 12 clinic students, and they all took an intake, which was wildly helpful, a stage 2 intake, and then wrote me a memo, like helping us determine whether or not to move it forward. That's awesome. We anticipate that next year her clinical students will again be working on some of these cases, both the ones that are in the active investigation. And they also were amazing, in helping me. So I will say the other tricky thing is I can't do my investigation alone, because I can't implicate myself as a witness in a case that I'm later chief counsel on.
Yeah.
So it's been, and we have some wonderful volunteer investigators, but that's been a little bit complicated trying to figure out how to manage the investigation piece, bringing in students and a whole other, and they've been really wonderful. Yeah. The students have been great in that as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, just seeing our time, I want to respect your time. I'm so thankful that you came and did this with us. Oh, but we got to do the fun questions first.
I spent all my time talking about work.
Lightning round. All right. So just going to pick 3 questions at random. Oh, where else would you like to live?
Vermont.
Yeah, that sounds nice.
Right.
Trees.
Yeah. Might have lovely family up there.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. That too. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, remember that old Capageros? They had the like extra dark chocolate. You know what I'm talking about? Capageros closed down. That was my favorite.
That place was amazing.
That, like, dark chocolate gelato.
Yeah. Everything at that place was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really want gelato.
Oh, Capageros, come back.
Oh, this is nice and appropriate. What do you appreciate most in a friend?
Aww. Keeping me honest. I
Hmm.
feel like I am so appreciative of my close friends that like call me on bullshit when I'm not doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And family. I'll put family in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to have people call you on
Yeah.
stuff.
Right?
Might not always be pleasant, but definitely helpful. All right. Well, thank you so much. If anybody wants, would you like them to do that?
I'm that last part of it fuzzed out for 1 minute on me. Oh dear.
Okay. You back?
Yes,
Uh,
yes. Okay, sorry.
that's okay.
How to contact the Innocence Project?
Mhm.
Yes, they can write to New Jersey Innocence Project at Rutgers University. It's 217 North 5th Street, Camden, New Jersey, 08102. So if you are incarcerated or if you have a family, friend, or loved one who is incarcerated and you believe they're innocent, but let me incarcerated in New Jersey. So we only take New Jersey cases, but please do reach out to us and we'd be happy to respond.
And I will we'll put that address in our show notes so people can get it that way too. Um,
Thanks, Jules.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm definitely need to follow up and make a date to hang out.
Yes.
But so great to see you here anyway. And I just want to tell our audience next week, Lisi's next podcast, One More Thing, will drop wherever you get your podcasts. And I'll be back next month, May 19th on LinkedIn Live with another interesting lawyer. I hope you'll join us then. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.